what should happen with gun laws. Richard Moran is here, Tom Dietz, Lou Palumbo, also David Sirota. David, I got an interesting tweet that said, all recent mass killings were committed by 18 to 25-year-old young men, primarily white. Virginia Tech is the exception. Are you saying that we should start profiling white men?
Well, I think we should ask the question, why is America 30% white guys and 70% of the mass shootings in the last many decades have been at the hands of white guys? I'm not saying we should racially profile white guys, but I do think it's interesting to note that had the shooters, had 70% of mass shooters been, let's say, Arabs or African American men, I think the conversation right now would be a very different conversation where we'd be having a much less nuanced, a much uglier conversation. And I think that we need to be asking the question right now I think we need to be asking the question about why the composite is so similar. Why are 70% of these mass shootings at the hands of white men? Is not to say that they should be racially profiled, but to ask the question, why is the composite so similar? Let's explore that. Let's ask that question because it's an important question in light of a political climate right now where there's a lot of what I've called the white victimization narrative out there. This idea that white people are being kept down, this idea that white people are being oppressed. Does this have anything to do with this? I think it's worth asking the question. And
you wrote an article for, was it Slate?
Salon.
You wrote an article for Salon.com, and in the article you said what I've heard a number of people say: if the victim was a black male, he'd be a thug. If the victim was a Muslim, he would be a terrorist. I mean, if the suspect or the shooters in either of these cases were either black thug, Muslim terrorist, and you mirrored that in your article.
Yeah, and I think that it's good that we're having a nuanced conversation about all sorts of things, mental illness, gun control, et cetera, but I hope that the next time something bad happens, and unfortunately there will be a next time, that if it's not a white guy, that we remember that we shouldn't ascribe to entire groups the actions, the bad actions of individuals, because we're not doing that right now, and I'm not saying that we should, but we should remember that the reason we're not is because it's a form of white privilege.
We'll be right back. Don't go anywhere.
Absolutely.
Fit that
Interviews Barbara Streisand. See you then tonight, 9 Eastern.
Okay, we're back talking about profiling possibly white men and the demographic that usually does this. Richard Moran, you wanted to say?
Yeah, if you try to make a profile, how many people are going to fit that profile? At least 500,000, maybe 4 or 5 million people will fit that profile. Then what do you do with it? You cannot predict rare events. That is the problem. Because they're so statistically insignificant, there's no way of spotting them. It's that simple.
Okay. Lou Palumbo?
Don, I think you should just have a general awareness of everyone in your space, and when you see off-color behavior, be guided accordingly.
And I want David Sirota, go ahead.
Well, my response is I think that everybody that just said was exactly right. But I hope the next time when something happens and it's not a white man at the center of it, that the same logic will extend to that person and those groups as well. My point here is that we tend to individualize crime by whites while ascribing to entire groups of people the actions of individuals if those individuals are non-whites. That if these were all Arabs who had been doing these mass shootings, we would be having a conversation about what to do about the Arab community. Right now, we're not having a conversation about what to do with the white male community because white privilege suggests that we should never ask those kinds of questions. And I don't think racial profiling is a good idea. I don't think it's successful, but we should remember the double standard.
Yeah, listen, no one thinks racial profiling is, but that's what profilers do. People who, right, that's part of the definition of being a profiler. Okay.